You're 22, badge inactive, outside building 1. 6 minutes until they either hand you a NASA ID or send you home. Above you, astronauts orbit at 5 miles a second. In 4 years, you might join them, or you might not. This is every rank in NASA. Live it. Level 0, the threshold. It's your first day as a NASA intern. You don't have a security clearance yet. You don't have a desk yet. You have a temporary badge, a name tag with your name spelled wrong, and exactly one job today. Don't get lost, and don't get noticed for the wrong reasons. Somewhere in this building, there's a version of you that becomes a flight director, another version that becomes an astronaut, another that runs the entire agency. Right now, none of that exists yet. Right now, you're just trying to find room 3N12 before 8 a.m. in a building where every hallway looks exactly like the last one, and every person walking past you seems to know exactly where they're going. You don't. Not yet. That's about to change. Level 1, the intern. The hallway smells like burnt coffee and floor wax. You find room 3N12 with 40 seconds to spare, and the man running orientation doesn't smile when you walk in. He just says, "Sit down. We're already behind." For the next 12 weeks, you are the lowest form of life in this building. You fetch data. You format spreadsheets nobody reads yet. You sit in the back of meetings where engineers argue about thermal tolerances on a valve you've never heard of, and you nod like you understand. Because if you ask a stupid question in front of the wrong person, that's the story they'll tell about you for the rest of the summer. You start to notice the hierarchy of silence in this place. Who gets to speak first in a meeting? Who everyone defers to without being told to? Who can interrupt a room full of PhDs and not get pushback on? You realize status here isn't given. It's earned in years, not weeks, and you have exactly 12 of them to prove you're worth investing in. Something happens in week 3. A senior engineer, burnt out, overworked, 20 years into a career that started exactly like yours, hands you a real problem, not busy work. A live thermal modeling issue on a hardware component that's actually going to fly. You stay until 9 p.m. 3 nights in a row, running the same numbers over and over, terrified of being the reason something fails a review. You get it wrong twice. The third time, you get it right. And he doesn't say good job. He just adds your name to the file. That's how you know you might actually belong here. At the end of the summer, they call names for return offers. Not everyone gets one. 2 people you ate lunch with every day pack their desks and don't come back. You do get the call. You drive home that night with the radio off because you want to remember exactly what this feeling is. You're not an intern anymore. You're about to become an engineer. Level 2, the entry-level engineer. Your first full-time badge photo is terrible. You don't care. You have a cubicle now, a government pay grade, and a manager who hands you your first real assignment on day 1. Verify test data on a component headed for a spacecraft that already has a launch date. This is where the fantasy dies and the job begins. Nobody explains anything to you twice. You're handed acronyms like a second language you're expected to already speak. ECLAS, GNNC, EVA, ORU. And if you don't know one, you go find out on your own time, not theirs. The learning curve doesn't feel like a curve at all. It feels like a wall. And you're expected to climb it while everyone else keeps walking at full speed. You make your first real mistake in month 2, a decimal point in the wrong place on a calculation that almost gets flagged in a design review in front of 40 people. Your supervisor catches it the night before. She doesn't yell. She just says, "This is why we have 3 people check everything. You're going to be one of the 3 now." You stop sleeping well, not because you're miserable, because you're finally scared in the way that means something matters. You start double-checking your own work at midnight from your kitchen table, not because anyone told you to, but because you can't stand the thought of your name being attached to a mistake that costs someone else. 18 months in, you get pulled into your first mission-critical test campaign. Real hardware, real consequences. If your analysis is wrong, it's not a grade, it's not a summer job. It's a system that has to survive the vacuum of space or bring a human being home safely. You feel the weight of that the first time you sign your name on a certification document, and your hand actually hesitates over the paper for a second longer than it should. That signature isn't just paperwork. It's the moment you stop being a student pretending to be an engineer and start being an engineer. Level 3. The Certified Flight Controller, the Backroom. 3 years in, your manager asks a question that changes everything. Do you want to try for a console position? Every engineer at NASA knows what that means. Mission control. The room. The one you've seen in movies since you were a kid, without ever imagining you'd sit in it. But nobody starts in the front room. You start in the back room, a support room down the hall from mission control, feeding data to the person who actually sits at the console during a live event. Your job is invisible. If you do it perfectly, nobody notices. If you get it wrong, everyone finds out in real time. Certification is brutal. Months of training, written exams thick enough to double as doorstops, simulated emergencies where instructors deliberately try to break you, feeding you cascading failures, contradictory data, and impossible timelines, just to see if you crack under a pressure that isn't even real yet. You watch senior controllers fail their certification runs and have to start over from the beginning, careers stalling out in front of you as a warning of what happens if you're not ready. You watch friends quit and transfer to quieter jobs. The day of your own certification simulation, the instructor throws a failure at you that isn't in any textbook. A combination of 2 unrelated malfunctions happening at once, designed to see if you panic or think. Your hands are shaking under the console where no one can see them. You work the problem anyway, talking yourself through each step out loud in your head, the way you were trained to. You pass. They don't throw a party. Someone just shakes your hand and says, "Welcome to the room." And for the first time, you understand that mission control isn't a place. It's a level of trust you have to earn every single day you sit down in it. Level 4. The Front Room, Mission Control. The first time you sit at a console in the actual front room, live, during real spacecraft operations, your voice doesn't sound like your own on the comm loop. 40 people are listening to every word. Somewhere above the Earth, a crew is depending on the accuracy of what you say next. This is where the job stops being about you at all. You learn the discipline of the loop. Speak only when necessary. Speak with total precision. Never guess. Never let panic enter your voice, even when it's screaming inside your chest. You watch a veteran controller call an abort recommendation during a simulation with the same flat, calm voice she'd use to order coffee. You realize that's not coldness, that's mastery. That's what it looks like when someone has trained fear completely out of their voice, one simulation at a time, over years. You spend your first months quietly terrified of being the one who says the wrong thing on an open channel. And slowly, that fear turns into something closer to focus. You stop hearing the 40 people listening. You start only hearing the problem in front of you. Then it happens for real. Not a simulation, an actual anomaly during an actual mission, a sensor reading that shouldn't exist on a system that's supposed to be one of the most reliable on the vehicle. For 4 minutes, you and your team work the problem in near silence, the whole room feeling the seconds bleed away, nobody speaking except to relay data. You find the answer. It's not the system, it's the sensor. False alarm, but you didn't know that until you'd already done everything right to prepare for it being real. Afterward, your hands shake in the bathroom, alone, where nobody can see. Then you go back to your desk and finish your shift, because that's the job. Level 5, the Subsystem Lead. You're no longer just responsible for doing your own job perfectly. Now you're responsible for the people doing theirs. You lead a small team of controllers and engineers on your subsystem, which means every mistake beneath you is now, in some way, yours. You start losing sleep over decisions other people make because you signed off on trusting them to make it. Meetings change shape too. You're no longer the youngest voice in the room, hoping not to get noticed. You're the one other young engineers watch to see how to act under pressure. You catch yourself, without meaning to, adjusting your posture and your tone the way the senior engineers once did for you, and it unsettles you a little, realizing you've become someone's example. A young engineer under you makes an error that almost costs the mission a critical data point. You could bury him for it. Instead, you remember the senior engineer who once caught your decimal point mistake without destroying you for it, and you choose the same path. You fix it, you teach him why it happened, and you never mention it in a room where it could end his career. He becomes one of your best people. This is the level where you understand something nobody explains clearly at the beginning. NASA doesn't run on genius. It runs on thousands of ordinary people refusing to let each other fail. you start to feel less like an employee and more like a guardian of something much bigger than your own career. Level 6, the flight director. The words that change your life come from your center director's office. We want you to try for flight director. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most demanding leadership positions in the world. Flight directors carry ultimate authority over a human spaceflight mission. Not the astronauts, not the engineers, you. If something goes wrong in space, the final call, abort or continue, risk it or don't, sits on your shoulders in real time, with lives depending on your judgment. The selection process strips you down to see who you actually are under pressure. Months of evaluation, every past decision scrutinized, every simulation you ever ran pulled up and picked apart. The interview itself feels less like a job interview and more like an interrogation of your character. Panelists asking you to relive your worst professional moments out loud and explain exactly what you do differently. You get the job. Your first shift as flight director, you sit in the center seat of mission control, and the room you once entered as a terrified intern is now yours to run. Every controller on every console is now, in a sense, in your care. You feel the strange full circle of it. The same room, the same hum of machines, but now every voice on the loop is waiting on you to make the call, not the other way around. The first time you have to make a real-time call on an in-flight anomaly, not a simulation, a real decision with a real crew waiting on your answer, you feel every year of this career collapse into a single second. You make the right call. The mission continues. You go home that night and sit in your car in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside, because you need a moment before you can be a normal person again. Level 7, the astronaut candidate. You never stopped watching the sky. Even as a flight director, some part of you still wanted to go, not just guide others there. You apply for the astronaut candidate program almost as an afterthought. Certain thousands of the most qualified people on Earth will beat you to it. Out of over 10,000 applicants, a number small enough to count on your fingers gets selected. Your name is one of them. You read the email 3 times before you believe it's real. And then you sit alone in your kitchen for almost an hour, unable to say the words out loud to anyone yet. Astronaut candidate training breaks you down and rebuilds you completely. You learn to fly T-38 jets, your stomach lurching on maneuvers you were never trained for as an engineer. You train underwater in the neutral buoyancy lab, simulating spacewalks in a suit that fights you for every inch of movement, for hours at a time, until your hands cramp inside the gloves and your forearms burn from gripping handrails that don't exist yet in space. You learn Russian because half your training partners speak it and half your future crewmates will too. And there's something humbling about being an accomplished professional again, reduced to stumbling over basic vocabulary in a classroom. You learn survival training in open water and in the wilderness, in case a landing ever goes wrong. You learn robotics, station systems, medical emergency response, because in space, you may be the only doctor available, whether you're a doctor or not. 2 years in, they pin an astronaut badge on your chest. It's not a ceremony that feels like graduation. It feels like being handed a level of responsibility you're not sure any amount of training could have fully prepared you for. Level 8, the astronaut. The day you launch, you don't sleep the night before, and you tell yourself it's the schedule and not the fear. Suited up, strapped in, the vehicle around you shakes in a way no simulator has ever fully recreated. Then the engines ignite, and for the first time in your life, the ground actually lets go of you. Weightlessness feels wrong before it feels beautiful. Your inner ear screaming that something has gone catastrophically wrong. Your training screaming back that this is exactly what it's supposed to feel like. Within days, you adapt. Within a week, you can't imagine walking again. You catch yourself missing the strange floating version of yourself, even during quiet moments strapped into your sleeping bunk. Your first spacewalk is the most vulnerable you've ever been. Nothing between you and the vacuum of space except a suit you helped inspect yourself. You work a repair with your heart rate climbing in your ears, following procedures you rehearsed hundreds of times underwater, none of which quite prepared you for looking down and seeing the entire planet curve away beneath your boots. No sound, no wind, just silence and light. You complete the repair. You float there for 4 extra seconds before your partner reminds you over the comm that you're behind schedule. You never forget those 4 seconds for the rest of your life. Level 9, Mission Commander. Your second flight, they give you the seat you never expected so soon, Commander. Every life on that vehicle, every decision under pressure, every call when something goes wrong at 3 a.m. station time, that responsibility is now yours to carry, the same way it once belonged to the flight director who trained you to trust the process. You feel the shift immediately. As an astronaut, you execute it. As commander, you decide. You spend the weeks before launch running scenarios in your head that have nothing to do with procedures, how you'd talk your crew through a crisis, how you'd keep your own voice steady if theirs started to break. A real emergency happens mid-mission. Not catastrophic, but serious enough that your training and your composure are the only things standing between a bad day and a very bad day. You give orders calmly. Your crew executes without hesitation because they trust you the way you once trusted every controller and director above you. You get everyone home safe. Standing on solid ground again after months away, you understand something you couldn't have understood as an intern all those years ago. Every single rank you passed through wasn't a separate job. It was one long apprenticeship in trust, earning it, carrying it, and eventually being trusted with someone else's life. Level 10. Center Director. Flight is a young person's game, and eventually your body and the calendar both tell you it's time to step back from crew rotation. But your career isn't over. It evolves. You're asked to lead an entire NASA center, thousands of employees, billions of dollars in programs, decades of institutional history resting on decisions you now make in boardrooms instead of cockpits. You're no longer flying missions. You're building the conditions that let other people fly them. Budgets, safety reviews, congressional briefings, workforce decisions that ripple across entire families. The job is quieter than mission control, but the stakes, in their own way, are just as heavy. You sit across from a nervous young engineer during a site visit, and something in his posture reminds you painfully of yourself on your first day in Building 1 decades ago. You take the extra 10 minutes to talk to him because someone once did the same for you, and you never forgot it. Level 11, the administrator. The final call comes from far above anything you expected. A presidential nomination, a Senate confirmation, and suddenly you are the person responsible for the entire agency. Every rank you've ever held, intern, engineer, controller, director, astronaut, commander, center director, is now in some way beneath your responsibility. Not because you're better than any of them, but because you've lived every single one of their realities. The job is nothing like flight. There's no console, no countdown, no clean moment where the engines either fire or they don't. Instead, there are budget hearings, program reviews, decisions about which missions get funded and which get quietly shelved. Each one affecting thousands of careers exactly like the one you once had. You find yourself defending programs to people who've never set foot in a clean room, translating decades of technical reality into language a room full of policymakers can act on. When you stand at a podium announcing the next generation of missions, crews who will walk on the moon again and eventually toward Mars, you look out at rows of engineers, controllers, and future astronauts, and you see every version of yourself that ever sat in those same rooms, scared, unsure, and quietly determined not to quit. Level 12, the legacy. You think back to a 22-year-old standing outside Building 1, waiting for a badge that wasn't active yet, terrified of being sent home. That kid had no idea he'd sit in mission control, walk in vacuum, command a vehicle carrying human lives, and one day stand as the person responsible for the entire agency's future. Every rank was a door. Every door required you to be someone slightly braver than the version of you that opened it. Somewhere tonight, another 22-year-old is standing in that same hallway, holding an inactive badge, terrified in exactly the way you were. One day, if they survive what's coming, they'll understand what you understand now. NASA was never really about rockets. It was about ordinary people refusing level after level to stop becoming who they were capable of being.